Well, hello. How are you doing today?
I am great. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful, and I'm so glad that you are willing to meet with me so that we could help you get over these proration problems
Yes.
because not going so well, huh?
No, ma'am. It's just seems like it's something I'm missing. Maybe it's a step there. Maybe I'm reading too fast. Maybe they should give us the option to be able to actually read out loud. I don't know what it is, but
Well, you're not wrong. I do think that reading out loud is like in your head, like put some intonation can be a lot
absolutely
into it. But I promise you, by the time we finish today, you're going to feel so much better about it. And I
perfect.
want you to think of prorations, basically the same math that you do when you split up a dinner, like when you go in a group and I had this and you had that and all of that. It's the
Mhm.
same math. So if you
Perfect.
understand that concept, you
Okay.
definitely understand the concept of prorations. So you
Okay.
see, I have this problem in front of us. So let's talk about it.
Okay.
A buyer purchases a seller from a seller. They didn't purchase a seller. How about that? From a seller, a condo that rents for 24.50 a month with rent due on the first of each month for that month's rent. Escrow closes on June 16th. Who pays whom in regard to the proration of the rent? So the first thing I would say is, does the problem make sense?
Yeah, so a buyer purchases a condo, rent is due on the first of the month, and escrow closes on the 16th. So pretty much trying to figure out who gets that extra money left over.
Yeah, so if I were to draw this out just a little bit,
Okay.
you know that you got July and June. My drawing skills are a lot worse than my math skills. So that means on June 1st, there was 24.50 that was paid
Mhm.
for the whole month.
Okay.
And now there is a closing on June 16th. So you know what we're going to say? We're going to make me is the seller and I'm going to make you the buyer.
Okay.
Right? So if this is true, if you are the buyer, when will you own the house? After the 16th, the 16th or after? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So are you okay with the fact that I got money for the whole month, but you're going to own the house for half the month?
No, I'm not okay with that.
So what would make things even Stevens or fair for you?
If the seller gives me a credit for those 16 days.
Exactly. So what you're basically saying is you would like from the 16th all the way to the end of the month, which
Mhm.
would make that the seller, me, is owing money. So that's a debit.
Mhm.
And then you, the buyer, you should receive money. That's a credit. And that's going to be for the same amount.
Okay.
Because if I owe you $500, I need to pay $500. You need to receive $500. I'm not
Right.
saying $500 is the right amount, but you get
Sure.
what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
So we already know it's money that's going to be a debit from the seller and a credit to the buyer. That's one part of this question done.
Yes.
However, now
Mhm.
we need to know how much.
Okay.
Should I give you all 24.50?
No, ma'am. No, because I'm only there for 16 days. So I need
Exactly.
half, probably half of that.
Well, we're not going to do the probably half. We're going to figure out daily.
Okay.
Now, one thing this question did not do, and I left it this way, is
Mhm.
it doesn't tell you 360 or 365.
Okay.
Most of the time, I'm going to say 99% of the time, it is supposed to tell you on your test.
Okay.
But I know every state is different. There are some states that say, look, you will always use a 360-day, year, 30-day month. There are
Okay.
some states that will say use a 365 calendar day. I think you should know how to do it both ways. But
Okay.
let me ask you, in your state,
Mhm.
how did your school prepare you? Did they teach you both 360 and 365, or did you only do 360, or did you only do 365?
I believe we only did 365.
All right, so we're going to do 365 days. And the other question that this doesn't necessarily answer, but I want to talk about is the day of closing.
Okay.
For example, in my state, we always assume the seller gets the day of closing. In
Okay.
other states, they assume the buyer gets the day of closing. But once again, I wanted to leave that up to you. In your previous prorations or any other type of math, how did your state have you handle it?
I believe it was the buyer.
The buyer gets the day of closing?
I believe so.
Okay, so buyer gets day of closing. But you also understand if the problem said the buyer gets the day of closing, we do that. If the
Okay.
problem says the seller gets the day of closing, we do that. I would encourage you to go back, just go back and look at your materials from your
Okay.
school and double check that it's a default the buyer gets the day of closing, just in case they don't. But
Okay.
generally, we are told whether it's PSI, Pearson View, California, New York, whatever the state is,
Mhm.
that you should be told what to do with the day of closing. But we're going
Okay.
to assume 365 days in the year, and that means there's, the different amount of days for the month, and
Okay.
the buyer's getting the day of closing.
Okay.
So if we know it's 2450
Mhm.
for the month of June,
Mhm.
how many days? We need a daily amount. How many days are there in June?
June has what, 31 days?
So June actually has 30 days.
30 days. Okay. Yeah.
Do you
Sorry.
know the secret to figuring that out?
No.
All right. Have you ever used the fist method?
No, I don't think I've heard of the fifth method.
Okay, so I don't talk about my fist. So
It's
this is your
better with mine.
thumb, and then you get a fist. Those are your knuckles, right?
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
we only need the knuckles. If it's on a knuckle, the month has 31 days. And if it's in a valley, it has 30 days,
Oh,
right? So
okay.
what we're going to do is I'm going to use a different color. We start with January. January's on a knuckle, so it has 31 days. And then
Okay.
February is in a valley. Now we know February really has 28 days, so we're
Right.
going to say 28 days. But then you got March is on a knuckle, so it's got 31 days. And
Okay.
April is in a valley, so it has
30 days.
30 days. May is on a knuckle, so it has,
31 days.
and then June is in a valley, so it has,
30 days.
and then July is on a knuckle, so it has.
31 days.
Now we're out of knuckles. So
Gotcha.
you could
Right.
either pretend like there was another knuckle, or you can go back and start at the beginning, which is what we're going to do, which means
Okay.
August also has 31
31 days.
days. And then
Okay.
you've got September with 30. You've got no what comes after September?
October.
August, September. Thank you.
31.
I was like, I can't remember. October got 31. Just a
Mhm.
little bit of a mind fart right there.
I get you. Listen, I messed up on what was that,
Hey, that's
June?
okay. And then November has 31, and then this or November has 30.
30. Hmm.
And then you've got December, which has 31. So I know that's terrible art, but does that make sense?
But great way of breaking that down because I never knew that. So that's very helpful.
And good. And I mean, you're going to need this in real life and other things like that. But hopefully, if you ever get stuck, you can don't draw a knuckle. Please just make a fist with your own
Right.
hand and just do, do,
Absolutely.
do. Okay. So we know that we're talking about June. So we're going to take that 2450 and we're going to divide it by, since it's June, 30 days. And do you understand how that would give us a daily amount
Right.
for rent? And so when we break that down, how many days is, I'm trying to say, how much is that per
How
day?
much is a day?
And I'm doing it too.
Mhm. 30. I don't think that's right. $81.66.
That's what I got at 2450 divided by 30 means you're paying $81 a day, or that renter is 81. And I'm just going to round this to 67 a day.
Right. Okay.
Now, remember, when it comes to rounding, there'll never be an answer on your test where if I go 66 cents, you go 67 cents. Like that's not going to, the answers will
Okay.
never be that close, right?
Okay.
So now what we know is that the owner, me, would get 15 days and then you would get 15 days, right? Because if we count
Right.
so you get the 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 29, 30. I always tell people use your fingers just to make sure, but
Okay.
that's 15 days.
15 days. Okay. Any
15 days
7.
at 81.67 a day.
I got 2125.05. So $1,225.05.
So let me make sure we got 81.67 times 15.
15.
I got 1225.05.
Perfect.
Mhm. Now you will notice since it was 15 days in this month, you
Mhm.
could have just divided by 2. But more
Right.
importantly, I wanted you to see how we came up with the number of days, the per day, and we come up with this final answer.
Okay.
Yes?
Understandable. So you mind if I go over that again? So,
Mhm.
okay, so the buyer is supposed to be prorated for the month that he will be taking possession. So the seller's going to credit that buyer for those 15 days. So what we did was we found out how many days were in that month for June. And then we divided the days by the 15 days by the I'm sorry, wait.
We divided the total rent.
Right, I'm sorry. We divided the total rent by the 30 days, which gave us how much he's supposed to be paid per day. And then we multiplied per day times 15, which gave us how much he's supposed to be credited back. Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
How does that
Perfect.
feel?
It feels great. It feels great.
I am going to show you, we drew out a month, and I could have done that in a timeline. I could have said, hey, this is the month of June. And I could have said, oh, it's the 16th. And we know this would have been, hey, this is the seller's part of the month. And
Mhm.
then over here is the buyer's part of the month. You get what I'm saying? Like I could have
Okay,
done this that way. And the
okay.
reason I'm saying is that because we could have looked at we can look at time either by a month or we can look at it by a year.
Mhm.
So we were dealing with a month because when it comes to the rent, they only prepaid for 1 month. But isn't it possible this person could have prepaid for the whole year?
Okay, yeah,
So
yeah.
if it was prepaid for the year, then this would be January 1st.
Mhm.
This would be December 31st. And then you would have had a date like June 15th or 16th. And you would have to figure out how many days are right here. And that would
Okay,
be days, months, even.
okay.
But the timeline and the concept of drawing it out on a timeline, does
Mhm.
that make sense?
It does. It does.
Because I do believe that prorations are easier to do and understand if there's a visual. If we're
Right.
talking about just a month, I literally still draw out like a month like this, like we see here. But when we're talking about a scale that's a year, I tend to draw it out that way so that I can see the months that I'm dealing with as I'm manipulating these numbers.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, cool. So, first one in the bucket. Yay, I love it. Let's do the next one. Gordon sold his condo to Sandra on March 7th. Gordon had prepaid his monthly homeowner's fee of $465 on the first of the month.
Okay.
How much of the homeowner's fee must the buyer reimburse Gordon for if the calendar year is used for the calculation and the closing day belongs to the buyer?
Okay. Okay.
So the first thing I'm going to point out is you see it says calendar year and the
Mhm.
closing day belongs to the buyer. So
Okay.
we're going
We
to
already
do
know.
exactly what we did last time.
Gotcha.
All right. What information do you think is important that I should note in this problem?
Okay, so let me read it out. So Gordon sold his condo to Sandra on March 7th. Gordon has prepaid his monthly homeowner's fee for 467. So we know that Gordon already paid for the month of March.
Okay. And so do you want me to timeline or do you want to do a calendar block?
We can do a calendar block.
Okay. So we got this and we're talking about the month of March. And
Mhm.
now how many days are in March?
March is okay. It's 31 days of March.
There we go. Okay. And we
Okay.
have a closing on the 7th.
Right. So we only worried about from the 1st to the 7th in March.
Okay. And Gordon prepaid. So
Mhm.
Gordon owes, this is the seller to the 7th, and then the 8th and beyond would go to the
Buyer.
buyer. So we know that the seller owes, and what's that word? If the seller owes, that's a seller,
Credit.
is it a credit or is it a debit?
If the, I'm sorry, the seller owes us a debit. I'm
There
sorry.
you go. That's okay. And if the buyer's going to receive,
That's a credit to the buyer. Yes.
then that's a credit.
Losing it.
And it's okay. It's a lot going on in these problems. And that is why I usually tell people, write it out step by step. Like, get the
Yeah.
little bits right and write them down first, because I
Okay.
would hate to see you do all the math, get the numbers right, and then mess up on the credit and debit part just because you're, overwhelmed.
So true. So
So I
true.
just tell people, take it step by step,
You're
and
right.
we already know.
Okay.
Okay, so we got this $465 fee for the month, and we're trying to figure out how many days it is. So if we've got a monthly fee, what do we
Mhm.
need to do to that?
So if we have a monthly fee, shouldn't we be dividing it by the days?
By the which days?
So we have monthly, shouldn't we divide it by well, it wouldn't be 30 days, the 7 days, the first of the 7.
So you want to take all of the $465 and put it into 7 increments?
Is that a smart idea? See, stuff like this is where I get a little tripped
That's
up.
okay. So think about it.
Okay.
465 is supposed to last the whole month,
Right.
and you are supposed to have the 8th through the 31st. So if we
Okay.
put it into 7 days, how many of those days do you get?
Okay. See, I'm thinking about the seller versus how much the buyer is supposed to be getting.
And
Okay.
maybe think of it this way. We're looking for a number of days, which
Mhm.
means we need a daily amount.
Okay. I understand.
So we're not even worried about how many days it is yet. We know it's 465 for a month, but
Mhm.
we're going to have to be credited and debited by a number of days. That's like having feet and inches. You either
Right.
want to work in feet or you want to work in inches, but you can't work in feet and inches.
Right. Okay.
So if we have monthly, we need a daily.
Daily. Okay.
How do we take 465, which is a month, and find a daily rate?
We're going to divide the 465 by 31,
There
31
you
days,
go. I love it.
which gives us $15.
$15. I'll trust your math on that. So
Mhm.
now we know it's $15. We have to figure out how many days. So first we said how much per day. Now we figure out the number of days.
Okay.
So I usually tell people to go ahead and use your fingers and toes. That is what they are there for. Because some people will say subtract and add one, subtract and didn't. I'm just like, fingers and toes get you to the right point every time. So using our fingers and toes, I know
Okay.
that the buyer gets, right?
Mhm.
I like to count what the buyer gets, or I could subtract out what the seller gets. It's going to give me the same thing, but I
Okay.
tend to work um in patterns. Like, I like to do the same thing every time. So I always like to figure out how much the buyer should get. That makes sense. I like to deal with the buyer side for the most part.
Okay.
Even though I
Okay.
could figure out the seller would have smaller numbers, I deal with the buyer. So I use
Gotcha.
my fingers and toes and go, the buyer gets for the 8th, the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27,
Okay.
28, 29, 30. So I counted 23 days.
Yep, that's what I got.
All right. Okay. So 23 days.
Times the
Did I
$15
go to
per day.
31? Did I do
Yeah,
31 days?
31
Okay, I
days.
just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to
Mhm.
make sure when I counted it out loud, I went to 31 days. So
Yeah,
23 days times
$15.
$15 a day.
345.
Mm, 345. And so that 345 how are we going to, I just want to make sure, is it really 23 days? I feel like that's
Let's,
wrong.
let's see. So
Let's
we
see.
got from the 8th to the 31st. I did
8, 9,
31st.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17,
8.
18, 19,
I
20,
got
21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Aha, it's 24 days. I was like, that's not right. Something's not right. It's 24 days.
okay.
But let's count it one more time
Time.
just to
Let's do
make
them.
sure.
Okay.
All
We
right.
got the 8th.
8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31.
24.
24 days. And now you see why I use my fingers and my toes, right?
It's very essential.
It is very essential because little mistakes like this happen. And, some people are like, oh, you should be perfect as a teacher. Says who? Says
Right.
what?
No such
I make
thing.
the same silly mistakes that you all do
Absolutely.
simply because, boom, you know? So I'm going to do this time 24 times
Mhm.
15, and that's going to give
360.
me 360. So we should be good. Let's double check our math. 465 divided
Okay.
by 31. That is 15. 15 times 24 is going to give me 360. Now, if you're ever feeling like, oh, I don't know, is that right or not right?
Mhm.
Shouldn't the seller, if we do the math for the seller, it should add
Same.
up.
Right.
So that means the seller had the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. That's 7 days.
Mhm.
And if I do 7 days times 15, that
Mhm.
gives me 15 times 7
105.
is 105.
Mhm.
So if I add the 360 and the 105,
We got 465.
boom, that feels good. And I can feel really confident about this 360 would be what the seller owes is 360, and 360 is what the buyer receives.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, how do we feel about that?
We feel good. We feel good. And this would be, and our 360 would be a credit to the buyer.
360 would be a credit to the buyer and a debit to the seller.
Seller. Okay.
Because that 360 means the buyer's receiving it, but where is it coming from? Is it
Right.
falling like manna from heaven? Like, it's
We
got to
wish.
come from somewhere.
Right. We wish.
And does it help you to see a different way? Like, it's okay to go back and check your numbers and to confirm when you do the two different sides that they add up. Will that
Right.
help you?
Yes, very much so.
Good. Yay. Are you feeling a little bit better about our proration so far?
I am. I am. I definitely want to do a few more.
Good. Well, that's good because I got a couple more.
Good, good. Oh, this is a big one, it looks like.
It's
Okay.
okay, but we're gonna draw it out and we're gonna make sense.
Okay. See, when they
Amelia,
get big like this, it's like I don't know what kicks in. It's just like, oh my God, so many words. There's so much going
it
on.
does. It does. Look, it big, little, I feel the same way too. And then I just break it down. I
Very
try to go,
intimidating.
okay, first. So literally in my mind, I like to imagine the time period, whether it's a timeline or a
Mhm.
month.
Okay.
Then I like to figure out, okay, am I dealing with months or days? Like there's some instances where I have an annual amount and I need
Okay.
it for 4 months. Well, if I need
Okay.
it for 4 months, I'm going to take an annual divided by 12. I'm not going to break it down into days because I'm dealing with months.
Okay.
Sometimes they want daily amounts, or so I'm going to have to do it that way. So for
Mhm.
me, figuring out, like just laying it out and seeing where I am with all the information, that can help me step by step
Okay.
instead of looking at it and going, there's so many things I could do. Nope.
Right.
First,
Okay.
imagine our time frame. So Amelia wants to sell her condo to Kathy for $100,000.
Hmm.
The closing date will be June 16th. If the property taxes, oh, I don't know what's going on here. I took these off the line. Come on, give it to me. Boom, boom, boom. If the property taxes are on the condo are $1,800 per year, paid in arrears, and due on January 1st of the following year, and taxes will be calculated on the basis of a statutory year, 360 and 30. What is the proration amount at closing, and who is credited and or debited if the day of closing belongs to the buyer?
Okay.
That's a lot. So
Okay.
I like
Yes.
to see what
Yes.
I do know in here.
Okay.
I'm going to start backwards. Day of closing goes to the buyer,
Right. So we know that.
right? We know it's going to be a statutory year, 360 and 30. So that means like when they're using statutory years, they're saying, hey, if they're trying to figure things out really quick and easy, or we just go 360, 30 just to make it easy.
Okay.
They're telling us to do that. So that's what we'll do. Every
Okay.
month will have 30 and the year has 360.
60. Okay.
Then it says, we got this longer sentence that says the taxes are paid in arrears and due on January 1st of the following year. Do you know what that means?
So that means the taxes were already paid prior to.
Well,
Well,
it doesn't mean that the taxes are paid already. What it means is that taxes will be paid in arrears. So
okay.
what we're saying is if you've got this year, 2023, this is the calendar year of 2023. The taxes for this year are due in January of 2024.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
So they're paid in arrears. Paid in arrears means you're paying in after you use it. Like when you have your water bill, you don't
Okay.
pay halfway through the middle of the month. No,
Okay.
they'll have you on a billing cycle. And after you use the water, then they say, here's what you owe.
Got you. Okay.
So
Okay.
these are taxes that are paid in arrears and due on January 1st of the following year. So it's telling us that these taxes are $1,800 for this whole year.
Okay.
But who's going to pay them and when are they due? They're due January 1st of 2024. But there was a closing on June 16th.
16. Okay.
So who is actually going to get that tax bill?
That buyer's gonna get that tax bill.
And you're the buyer. Is it fair that you pay the entire $1,800 for
No, ma'am.
2023?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so what would make things even Stevens?
If the seller gives me a credit for the time that he occupied the unit.
Okay, so what days did the seller occupy?
He occupied from January to June 16th.
So January 1st through
June
June 16th. And I will tell you, there is no shame in my game. Even when I'm doing this just to check papers, I'm like, January has 30 days,
31.
and then I'll do February. Well, because remember, we're not doing 31.
Oh, right, right. We're
So I'm going to
doing
do February has
stuff
30
I gotta
days.
remember.
And March has 30, and
Mhm.
April has 30, and May has 30. But June, the seller isn't responsible for all the days in June. If the day of closing belongs to the buyer, then the seller is responsible from June 1st to the 15th.
Right.
So
15.
that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I would take that and I would say 30 times 5, which is 150 days, plus another 15, which is 165 days.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop right there.
Okay.
Does my very elementary way, but laid out so I don't make silly mistakes. Does that
It
make
helps
sense
me a
to you?
lot. Someone like me needs it to be broken down like
Girl,
this.
someone like me needs to be broken down, and I've been doing this for 20 years. But otherwise, I make silly mistakes.
Yeah, me too. Moving too fast,
Moving too
overthinking it.
fast. All right, so we know how many days.
Okay.
What we skipped over, and that's okay, is how much per day. Because we know it's
Okay.
165 days. How much per day? How am I going to find out how much it is per day?
So we're gonna divide that 165 days by 30.
So what we'd be taking is 30 days, 165 days, and putting them into 30. We're talking about amounts. We
Okay.
know it's $1,800 per year,
Mhm.
and we need daily.
Oh, okay, okay. So we would divide that 165 by the 1800.
So you have 165 days.
Mhm.
Like, let's do this 165 times. And you want to take all these 165 and put it into 1,800 other groups.
Oh, okay.
So what you want to do is you want to take 1,800 and divide it by 360,
Okay.
because this $1,800 is for the year.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Getting what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
So think of it this way. We know how many days. That's how many. Now we need how much. And how much is dollar signs. So we have to take a dollar amount and manipulate that.
Okay.
Do you get why I'm saying that?
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm going to take 1,800 and divide it by 360. What do you get when you do that?
So when I get 1,800 divided by 360, I have 5.
Okay, I'm doing it too. I got 5. $5 per day. So this seller owes for 165 days at $5 a day. And we know that means you're going to multiply. And what do you get?
Okay. Times 165. I got 825.
So does that feel about right? If it's $1,800 a year and the seller owes you for a little bit less than a year, does 1,825 feel about right?
Yeah, a little less than a year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. So
Yeah.
that would be a seller debit
Mhm.
and a
Buyer
buyer
credit.
credit. Do we miss anything? Do we feel weird about anything?
No. Okay, so just so I can break this down for myself.
Yes.
Okay. So, um, the taxes on the condo were $1,800 per year paid in arrears. So
Mm-hmm.
the buyer bought the home, January, what? Taxes is due January 1st. The buyer bought the home June 16th.
Stop
So
there. Explain to me about this January 1st. Why is it January 1st, 2024 that they're due and not January 1st, 2023?
because they were paid in arrears. So
Perfect.
they already used it up. So this is their bill after they have lived in the home
I
already.
love it. Go for it. Continue.
Okay. And so what we did was we had to break down and see how many days. They already gave us the easy math. They made it a little easy for us and gave us the 360 by 30. So we know it's going to be 30 days in each month. So what we did was find out how many months he occupied the unit. And so we
Mm-hmm.
got that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 6 months. So we did was multiply the 30 days. I'm sorry, was it 5 months?
It's 5 months.
I'm sorry, 5 months. We
Okay.
multiplied the 30 days by 5, and that gave us the 150, plus
Mm-hmm.
another 15 days from the days in June,
Mm-hmm.
and that gave us 165. So with
Mm-hmm.
that 16, that's 165 days. So what we did was 165 days time. No, I'm missing something here. So we did the 108, the 1,800 divided by 360. That was already given. They gave us the 5 days. Then we multiply the 5 days by the 165, which is how much per day. And that gave us the 825, which is a seller's debit. Seller's debit, buyer's credit.
So this is the step that I want you to remember.
Okay.
It's the how much per day.
Okay.
You got to take the total and divide by, the number of days.
Days. Okay.
That's the step that you seem to be catching yourself on, but that's okay. You can
Okay.
catch yourself on it all day long. And the more you do practice problems, the more
Right.
you're going to remember to go, oh, I need a total amount and divide
Right.
it and find how many days it is. Oh, I need a total amount. I need to divide that, figure out how many days it is.
Gotcha.
And that will just come from practice. But now if
Yes.
something goes wrong and you
Okay.
do a whole problem on the test and you don't have the answer, the first thing you want to look at is, did I do my dividing of my days? Did I take the total and divide it by the right amount? Like, Did I do
Got-
that right?
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
And let's try another one.
Okay.
Betty purchased a condo from Dave, on which Dave had an outstanding loan balance of 275,000, with a
Mhm.
loan at 4% interest. The closing date was the 20th. Guess it doesn't. It says statutory year. Sorry, just jumping ahead. It didn't tell us a month, but it says the
Right.
20th. But do we see it doesn't matter because it's going to be statutory?
Yes.
But let's just give it a month because I think that's weird. Let's give it, what month were you born in?
I was born in October.
All right, October 20th. All right, October 20th. If Dave's loan payment was made arrears on the first day of each month and Betty assumed Dave's loans, who should have paid whom in regard to the proration of the interest? The closing day belongs to the buyer and the calculations are based on a statutory year.
Okay.
So, do we
Okay.
understand what that means when we talk about mortgage payments are paid in arrears?
So yeah, so pretty much the mortgage payments is due, we already lived in the home, so this is what we owe.
Yeah, so that month before October, what is that? September,
Mhm.
and then you got October, and then you got November. So what we know is that there's a seller who starts with the house. The
Okay.
seller would have paid October 1st for September. If
Right.
the seller kept the house on a November 1st, they'd be paying for October.
Mhm.
You with me?
Yes.
But we had a little snafu here because what happens is there was a closing on the 20th.
Okay.
So as of the 20th,
Mhm.
the house now belongs to the buyer. You're with me?
Yes.
And then there's another catch in this question. I don't know if you got that. It's this idea that Betty assumed Dave's loans.
Mhm.
Do you know why that affects what we're doing here?
Because she's taking on, Betty assumed they've loaned, so I guess because she's taking on a loan, I don't know. I think
Okay,
I'm
so I'm going to kind of lay this out.
okay.
In a normal transaction, we know that Dave had a balance of 275. So in
Mhm.
a normal, just regular cash sale, wouldn't Dave get the purchase price from Betty and pay off his loan? And
Yes.
then Betty would have gotten a new loan?
Yes, absolutely.
That's normal. But
Absolutely.
that's not what happens in an assumption. In an assumption, there was a mortgage between Dave and the bank. And in an assumption, what we're doing is we're replacing Dave and putting in Betty.
Mhm.
So Betty's taking over the payment. She's not getting a new loan. She's
Right.
stepping into Dave's place,
Yes.
which means nothing changes about this November 1st payment,
Okay. Facts. Okay.
right? So she's going to pay on November 1st for all of October.
Yes.
Does that seem fair?
No.
All right. What would make things fair?
If the seller credit me back for the 20 days that he occupied the unit.
Well, if the day of closing belongs to the buyer, does he owe you for 20 days?
Oh, wouldn't it be 20, I think that's about the truth. Would that be 21 days
Well,
instead?
so you're trying to do that. Oh, let me do the math, but let's think about it. That seller owes for the first up until the 19th because the
Okay.
buyer gets the day of closing.
Right. That's the part that keeps tripping me up every time. Okay.
So think about it. That you can draw it out. You could be like the seller owes for the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth, the ninth, the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, the 16th, the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th. He doesn't owe for the 20th because that is going to the buyer. So that's 19 days. Would you agree with me?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So we're going with 19 days. Cool. This seller owes to this buyer 19 days.
Yes.
Because what's going to happen is the buyer owes from the 20th until the end of the month. And then that buyer is going to pay the bill. They're going to
Right.
take their money and they're going to take that money from the seller to pay this bill.
Okay.
How do we
Okay.
feel?
You feel good.
Cool. So we know it's 19 days
Mm-hmm.
and we know they didn't, well, we know something. We know it's a $275,000 loan at 4% interest. But did they give us a daily amount? Did they give us a payment?
No.
No.
Just the interest.
Luckily for us, they gave us a way to figure out payment.
Okay.
Because, and I'll change colors here. Let's do purple. This right here, this 275 at 4%. That 4% is an annual interest. If Dave had gone to the bank and said, "Hey, bank, I want to borrow $275,000. I'm going to borrow it for exactly a year. I'm not going to make you a single payment until a year goes by.
Right.
And I will pay you off completely in that year. I will pay you the 275 plus I will pay you 4% of 275 for
Right.
borrowing it for a year."
Right.
So in that case, Dave would pay 275 times 4% for an amount of annual interest. If he borrowed that money for a year, he would owe the 275 plus whatever 4% of 275 is, which is
11,000.
275 times 4%, 11,000. That would be for a year. But the thing is, he didn't borrow 275,000 for a year. He just made a payment on October 1st. As of
Right.
October 1st, he owed 275. So he
Okay.
really only owes 275 for 30 days.
Okay.
Last month he owed like 276. Next month he'll owe 274. How much you're borrowing changes every month because every month you pay it down.
Okay. Okay. I see what
Does
you're
the
saying.
logic behind that make sense?
Yes, it does. Very much so.
So if it's 275 for a year or 275 at 4% for a year is 11,000 annually.
Right.
But what we need is some days. What can I do with this $11,000 that's an annual amount and make it into a daily amount?
Divide that by the
By
30 days
by how many?
by the 19 days.
So you want me to take $11,000? Do that for me. Take 11,000 and divide it by 19.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That didn't come out right. 1.7, whatever that's supposed to even mean. I don't even think that came out correctly.
Yeah, I was like, try that again. 11,000 divided by 19.
0.57.
So tell me what you put in the calculator.
11. Oh, first of all, I put 11.
11,000.
That's
So I said
part.
11,000. Yeah,
And I put
11,000.
11 times 9. I mean, divided by 19. 578.94. So
That sounds about
578.95. Say it again.
598 per day sounds about right.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna do 598 times what?
So 598 times okay. So now is it times the 19 days
Okay,
or
what do you get when you do that? Because that's your you said 598 per day, and it's 19 days. So multiply that by 19.
I got 11,362.
So you owe $11,000 that month?
No, no.
Okay, and I let you go through with it because you see how
Yeah.
there's a problem there?
Yeah, big
So
time.
I'm gonna back up.
Okay.
It's $11,000 annually. How many days are in a year?
365
But we're gonna go ahead and use.
to 360.
So if it's annually $11,000 a year, and
Mhm.
we need daily.
Oh, 360. Okay.
So we're going to take that $11,000 and divide it by 360. Guess what step we messed up on again?
What's
I
that?
mean, no, that's the same step.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay. I'm
That
like,
is
oh
that
no, what messed up
same
at?
step that we messed up earlier that
I
we
don't
got
know what
wrong that
is
you
about
can't
me in
do.
that step.
That's
Okay.
okay. Because the more you practice this, the more you're going to be like, let me not mess up this step. Let me not mess
Right.
up this step. And eventually you won't mess up this step.
Okay.
So now when you take 11,000
Divided by 360. I have 31.
and let's see, I have 11,000. If I get it stuff in my calculator divided by 360.
Mhm. So it's 30.5. I just
I would
round.
go ahead and keep the 30.55. I would
Okay.
keep that.
Okay.
So I'm going to go 30.55 a day. See
Okay.
how different that feels than $578 a
Yeah,
day?
makes
That's
more
a lot.
sense.
That's a lot. I mean, if I were to make 578 a day at work, I mean, that's not a lot of money, but I take it.
I know
But
I would.
making $30 a day would be the problem. I could not survive off of that.
Not at all.
All
Not at
right. So that's 30.55 a day.
all. Hmm.
And now who needs to pay whom? Who's going to need money on November 1st? Who's making that payment if it's a loan assumption?
So it would be Betty making that payment.
So how many days does Betty need to get from the seller?
19 days.
So we're going to do that 30.55 times 19 days.
Okay. 580.
$580. Any change?
55 cents.
That would be a seller debit
Buyers.
and a buyer credit. You want to talk me through what we did and why we did it again?
Okay. So with this one, they gave us how much the loan was and that the percentage it was, but it didn't give us how much per day. So we had to break down and see how much it was per day. Also going into it knowing that the closing was on the 20th and that the payment was already paid in arrears. So there needs to be some type of credits given. So what we did was we found out, this is the one. We found out, there we go. We found out what the annual interest was. And so then we had to take that annual interest and divide that by how many days, which was the 360. And that gave us 33.5. And then we multiplied the 19 because there was 19 days left in the month of October that needed to be credited back to the buyer. So we took that
Wait,
19
wait,
days.
wait, wait. Nope. So I'm going to change it. It's
Okay.
not 19 days that were left in the month of October.
Mhm.
Just being picky. Those are
Okay.
the 19 days that the seller owned
Oh,
the house in
okay.
October.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that's just me
Okay.
being picky because if the question had said, how much of
Mhm.
the monthly payment does the buyer owe? Then the buyer
Okay.
would be paying from the 20th through the 30th. But
That's
just
what I'm saying.
being
Okay.
very picky, it's 19 days because it's 19 days that the seller owned the house and the
Gotcha.
seller needs to pay for those days.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. So yeah, so there's 19 days against the days that the seller occupied the home. So it
Hmm.
needs to be credited back to us. So then we multiplied that $30.55 per day by the 19 days, and we came up with 580.55, which is a seller's debit and a buyer's credit.
And where did we make our mistake? I'm
I
not saying
made
it's
my
right now,
mistake.
but where did we get caught up at? What did we have to fix?
The amount per day. I
And
got
what
kind of
did you do
mixed up with
wrong? What did we have to make sure you get what I'm saying? Like, what's the catch there? Where did you?
uh making sure I understand the days that the seller actually occupied the unit.
Well, you did that, but what you did is you
Okay.
took this, and I'm just going to put this over here. You took the 11,000 and you divided by 19.
Okay.
Why was that wrong? Why
Oh,
do we
right.
not divide?
Because that's the interest, that's just the annual interest. We still need to figure out what that is per day.
And so we actually needed to divide it by 360.
60.
So just going back again, that's where we had a hiccup here, where we needed to
Right.
divide it by 360. And that's where we had a hiccup here, except we didn't divide by 360. We divided by this one. We did
365.
31 days because we were talking about
Mhm.
months, but that's where our
Right.
hiccups kept coming. So I'm pointing it out to you, not because I think you're doing something wrong, but because
Need
I
to be
know that's where
mindful.
you're going to need to
Yeah.
catch yourself. I have a
Right.
daily, I have a total. I either need to divide by 360 or 30, one of those.
Okay.
All right, let's do one more. I had one more here
Okay.
for you.
Perfect.
Scrolling. It's not very pretty, but it is a scroll. So, a purchaser, a buyer, okay, I guess it's a purchaser buyer, sure, purchased a condo for $175,000 that had been rented from the seller at $1,705 a month. I feel
Okay.
like we did that already. Did we not do this one
I
already?
think so. I think something similar to that.
I was like, why does it
Sorry,
sound so familiar?
give me 1 second.
Oh, it's close. It's close. Before we had
Similar to,
2450, but we're talking about rents again, so that's okay. There should be an easier way to go from page to page on this thing. Sorry to make you dizzy.
it's okay.
So, a purchaser purchased a condo for $175,000 that had been rented from
Mhm.
the seller at $1,705 a month. Rent is
Okay.
payable in advance on the first of each month. Escrow
Mhm.
closed on July 21st. How should the $775,000 selling price be adjusted at the close of escrow, rounded to the nearest dollar if the day of closing belongs to the buyer and calculations are based on a calendar year?
Okay.
So
Okay.
what do we know? Any
So
information that pops out at you right now?
so we know the purchase price is 175
Mm-hmm.
and the rental amount is 1705 per month.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the seller is going to close on that home on the 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a credit there from the occupying from the 1st to the 20th. And they want us to round it to the nearest dollar.
Okay. I love it. 360 or 365 according to this problem.
Based on calendar year, wouldn't it be 365?
Yeah, girl. We love it. So we got the 365 year. Okay. Any place that you want to start?
Okay, so we know that the renter occupied the home from January 1st to July 21st. Um, let's see, and how many days seller has? Okay, so we need to see how many days that the unit was occupied, and we can start there first.
Okay. So how many days did this buyer or this renter occupy the unit?
Okay, so let's
I'm going to
see
stop you
here.
because I
So we
already
got
know you're overthinking.
okay.
If you have a rental property, okay, let me say it this way. You're buying a rental property from me. Is my renter
Mhm.
going to get out because you're buying it from me?
He's not gonna get out until the contract is up, whatever
Right.
that.
So we don't need, I just want to make sure you don't need for the whole
Okay.
year. Because I can see where
Okay.
your brain was about to say, okay, that's from January to July. But
Yeah.
are we going to need January to July in this instance? Is that what we're
No.
splitting up? No, we're splitting up monthly rent. How much was our
Right.
rent per month?
Okay.
So we're
So that's
talking
okay.
about this is a month. And how much was the rent per month? How much did they pay every month?
1705.
And because we know we have an issue with it, we need to take that. If that's monthly, How are we going to get a daily amount? Let's just go ahead and get our hard step over with. If it's 1705 for a month, how do we find daily?
Divided by 365 days.
Okay, that would be correct if we were looking over multiple months, but we're looking at 1 month.
Okay, okay. So we would divide how many days is in that month by the 1705.
There you go. And so if this is the month of July, how many days in July?
July has 31 days, right?
Yeah, so we're going to divide by 31 days
Okay,
because
so we
that
got
gives me how many days per and that how much per
how much per
day
day?
in that 1 month.
Okay.
Because I want to
So,
make sure we don't care about what happened before July or after July. We are only trying to prorate what's in
right.
front of us right now. It's kind of like I don't care what happened last time we went out to eat. I don't care what happens
Yeah.
next time we go out to eat. Right now, I'm looking at this bill, and this bill for this month was the
Right.
1705 that this renter paid
Okay.
in full to the seller. And if you're the buyer, you want your portion of it.
Absolutely. I know I
Cool.
do.
So when you took that
Okay.
1705 and divided by 31,
55.
55 a day, a nice even number. All right.
Mhm.
So what should we do now?
Okay, so we know how much it is per day. So round to the nearest dollar, day of closing. Okay, so 55. So wouldn't it be the 55 times the 20 days?
And where did you get 20 days from?
Because
You're not wrong. I just want to make sure.
he occupied it from the July 1st to the 20th, but he takes possession, the buyer gets the closing day.
Yes. And so it's the renters occupying for the whole month, but the
Mhm.
seller gets to keep from the 1st to the 20th. And then the 21st is the buyer. Does that make
Buyer.
sense? Closing was on the
Yes.
21st, but the day
Mhm.
of closing belongs to the buyer. So the
Right.
seller gets the 1st through the 20th, and then the buyer should get the money for the 21st through the end of the month.
Okay, perfect. Got
Make
it.
sense?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's the seller who needs to give to
Mhm.
the buyer for 20 days. So
Yes.
$55 times 20 days.
It's 1100.
All right. That's 11,000. Let's fix that. Boop.
I'm sorry, that's
No,
my
no,
bad.
no. That was me. I put 11,000. That wasn't you.
Okay.
So that's $1,100 of rent that needs to
Mhm.
go to the buyer.
Right.
Now, I promise you that will be an answer choice.
Okay.
But do you understand why that is not the answer actually this time?
No.
And I'm going to say this, you did the math all right,
Okay.
right? Like you did the math right. It's what they're asking us for. And I'm going to choose a different color here. What they
Okay.
said is, where did it go? How should the 17 or the 1,755 bleh, if I could talk, that'd be helpful. How should the $175,000 selling price be adjusted? So what they're actually saying is, hey, seller, you're supposed to receive, this is a seller credit of $175,000, but seller, you owe $1,100. So what is that adjustment? It's not that you're going to receive 175
Oh.
seller. You getting what I'm saying there?
Oh, so you're gonna subtract that 1100 by the 175?
Ye- Well, you're going to take the 11. Yes, I think you said it. I think you meant to say it right, but want to make sure you're good. Instead of receiving 175, they're going to receive less 1,100. Was it what, $10? It's
Right.
actually here, $1,100.
So it'll be
So it's
eleven
going to
hundred
be,
dollars less of the 175.
yep.
Okay.
And that gives me 173,900.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm looking at this. I'm like, how should the 75 be adjusted? This is one of these that doesn't give you a choice A, choice B, choice C. So if it was, I think it would either say, you know, you should debit the 1100, or I've seen them say something like it'll be 173,900 after the 1100 adjustment. I just want to make sure that you saw that. How should it be
Yes.
adjusted? It's going to be adjusted. Yes, this 1100, but make sure they don't, if they give you something like, oh, it's 173,900 after the adjustment, how should it be adjusted? It should be to 173,900. Make
Okay.
sense?
Yes, it does. This
And
was actually very helpful, especially
good.
just kind of like really seeing where I keep stumbling at, if that makes sense.
Hmm, hmm.
So it kind of helps me like really hone in on what I need to pay attention to for sure.
Good, good, good. And look, you saw me stumble through it too. It's not just you. Like you have to be very careful. And the good news is these questions I just got from like one of those, here's some free question sites, which is, and so I'd never done these on it. I've never done these before. So I would say the
Got you.
awkwardness of this, how much should the selling price be adjusted? I, not
Mhm.
how I think you're going to see it written on the test. I think you'll probably see something more like, what is the credit or debit amount? Or what is the final
Okay,
amount received by the seller or something like that. I think that's a little awkward, but that's what you get with free.
gotcha.
You get what you pay for. But practice questions are good because now you can go and do the same thing, whether it's
Right.
Prep Agent or CompuCram or a book that you have. Just know by working through them, you can
Mhm.
you can see the different scenarios that they might present so that you get
Okay.
really comfortable on the exam.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Well,
Thank
is
you
there
so much.
anything did any other lingering questions on this that we need to cover?
I don't. If I do, is it possible to email you?
Of course, you can email me. You
Thank
can
you.
email me and we can talk about, or you can show me the math. And before
Okay.
you email me, you're going to check what's the first place you're going to check that did I divide the total amount either by the number of days,
Okay.
like 360 days or 365, or if you're talking about a monthly
Okay.
by the 31 or the 30 days. That's the first place you're going to check. But
Okay.
of course, you can email me if it's not, if the math ain't mathing.
Thank you. Thank you.
All
I
right.
appreciate you
You
so
are
much.
so
You've been so
welcome, and I'll
helpful.
see you next time, okay?
Thank you. See you
All
soon.
right,
Bye bye.
bye.